The People's Platform.
Good evening and welcome to the show. My guest tonight is Dr. George Cooke, diplomatic historian. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Sonali.
George, much of the world is at war and we're witnessing heartbreak in real time across borders. Speak to us about how dangerous this is and what we can do to sort of cope, because the mental health toll it takes on people who are witnessing it across television screens, on social media, is also quite dire.
This is where, Sonali, we've been at war all the time. There's very few moments in history where we can say we were at complete peace. The ammunition industry continues to dominate on the global stage, and the longer we keep producing them, the more we are going to see wars, battles being waged all over the world. And so you're talking about witnessing it, watching it. Now imagine being in the midst of it, experiencing it on a daily basis. There's no respite, there's no putting the TV off or changing a channel, where you are actually in the thick of it. Where do you go? What do you take with you?
And the powerlessness that comes with it. And the loss of dignity and agency.
So this is where, when we talk about crises that have happened in the past, over the years, we are now beginning to realize through technology, through the power of social media, we're realizing what would have happened during the First World War, Second World War, what happened in various skirmishes internationally, things that happened in this own country. This is where we are now realizing, oh my goodness, so much has been going on, and how much has been done to avoid, not to repeat, but we keep going down those roads again and again. We saw Russia, Ukraine bursting out onto the world stage a couple of years ago. Last year, we've seen the whole issue with regard to Hamas attacking Israel and the repercussions of that. This is only continuing to grow. And it's sometimes we think, sitting in Sri Lanka, we think, oh, Russia, Ukraine are quite far away. Israel is not exactly our immediate neighbor. But these have impact on all of us. They are impacting our lives and will continue to impact our lives. It is now that we are beginning to realize the impact this will have on shipping, on tourism, on investment, on international financial markets, on trade. This is going to have a direct impact on all of us. For example, Wuhan was something unknown to many people. We all know Wuhan now because we've all gone through it. We've experienced COVID. And this is where anything happening anywhere on the planet, we have to be concerned about. There's climate change that is going on right now. People are getting displaced due to natural disasters that are taking place. On top of that, we have the human-made disasters, which are adding to the problems that we already have.
How does state responsibility feature? How does R2P, responsibility to protect, feature? How do agencies like the United Nations and other international organizations, how must they converge? How must they be proactive? How must they care enough to intervene in these crises?
So when we look at R2P and the history of it, how it was brought in, why it was brought in, how it was exercised, there is a lot of area of concern, question marks. It's a bit of a grey area right now. Where do you intervene? Where do you not intervene? Why did we not intervene in Rwanda? Why did we take so long? Why was it important to go into Kuwait immediately? So you can see distinct differences there. It's boiling into something completely different. Natural resources, what you have in your country. What am I going to get out of coming to help you at that particular point? What am I trying to do on the world stage in terms of my position and my power? I want to grow and grow even further on the power ladder. You want to be the influencer rather than the influenced, and you want to take it to another level. And this is where, when you look at the United Nations today, many questions are being raised about the effectiveness. For example, as soon as we saw developments taking place in West Asia, we heard of the UN Secretary General undertaking a visit to another country in South Asia. Now, was that absolutely necessary, absolutely urgent? There was so much going on, so much that had to be done. We were facing a crucial beginning. You need to nip it in the bud. It is now growing. The problem is worsening. But then we also argue, okay, we close it. What next? If not the UN, then what? Do we have other alternatives? Do we have other options? Can we sit around a table and agree on another international organization? No. We have to face a crunch moment. We have to be up against the wall. We have to really be frustrated for us to come up with consensus building around that table. Until then, we will never be able to get that done. So we've got to make the most of what we have.
How significant is the action filed by South Africa at the International Court of Justice?
Very significant, but it remains to be seen how much that would be recognized, how much of actual weightage that would have in the long run when it comes to Israel. Would that action turn into some kind of measures that are going to be implemented? That is what we need to wait and see. But have you noticed something very interesting happening? Look at Russia, Ukraine too. There has been now a continuous talk about documenting everything that is going on. We are now not waiting for it to end and then doing the research and analyzing it.
Right.
From day one, people are starting to do that. And this is a huge change that we're seeing on the world stage, which we did not see in the past. So there will be a lot more in-depth study, not only study, but action that could be taken in the years ahead with regard to leaders, with regard to countries, and the actions that they take in those countries.
Right. I'd like to draw your attention to Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's situation. The president has shown great interest and initiative in engaging with the international community, as evidenced by his multiple visits to strategic overseas locations. At present, the president is in Uganda to attend the non-aligned summit, where leaders from over 100 countries are converging. What is the significance of the president's visit to Uganda at a time like this?
So this is where the non-aligned movement, Uganda is trying to probably see a transformation in NAM, reviving NAM. It's very important to see all leaders coming for a summit. The level of participation denotes the amount of significance that countries give to an organization or a grouping.
Right.
Now let's not forget the non-aligned movement is a movement. Movements will gather momentum and movements can lose momentum. Right. That is what we have seen with regard to NAM since 1961. Now, at this particular juncture, it is very opportune to revive NAM, to look at a new NAM, a new form of non-alignment. How are we going forward? But how many countries are genuinely non-aligned? Sri Lanka has not been genuinely non-aligned right throughout its existence in NAM. We have had leaders who have said non-alignment runs like a golden thread through our foreign policy, and they have gone to absolute extremes. So how can we justify that? But at the same time, it's a very good position not to delve too deep into either side. But it's not a case of sitting on the fence and trying to jump to one side or the other. That is very opportunistic.
Right.
That is something that we should never do, or playing one against the other. It should be a situation in which we are very cautious as to what we put our fingers into and what we don't. Because the moment we go and do that, there are repercussions. Repercussions immediately, repercussions in the short term, long term, you name it, there are repercussions. Do we realize those? A statement can have a huge impact. And when you talk about the visits, very important, very significant, he realizes the importance of foreign policy. He realizes it. Now, we've got to put our words into action. The budget allocated, the allocation that goes into foreign policy, to the foreign ministry, has to be expanded drastically. You want tourism, you want trade, you want investment, you want everything from the outside world. You've got to put in a lot more into that machinery to ensure that a lot more is going to come back. So it's important for us to go, be present, be visible, to actively participate, not just token representation, but actively contribute. In the past, in lots of these organizations, we've brought about proposals, we've brought about suggestions which have led to tangible action. Now, we've got to see that coming into operation. For that, we need to ensure there is a lot of work that is done to implement those proposals, implement those suggestions. I can't make a suggestion to you and give you an idea and then forget about it later on. I have to follow through. It has to be something that results in something realistic taking place.
Do we have the machinery to make it work?
We've got to push for that. We've got to ensure that it happens. We've got a network of high commissions and embassies around the world. We've got a foreign service. We've got to ensure that we are going to enhance, strengthen, really boost potential and capacity within in order to deal with the outside world. Whether it be language capability, whether it be negotiation skills, whether it be going out there and simply representing the country. Now this has got to be taken to a much higher level than what we are at right now. The foreign service is not an opportunity of traveling the world. It's not an opportunity of educating your children overseas. There is a lot more to it. There is also the psychological side of it, the emotional side of it. You're leaving family, you're leaving friends, you're leaving your home, you're traveling out there. But that's a responsibility that you're taking on. You are an ambassador of the country. Everyone is a representative. You've got to do as much as possible to ensure that the flag is flying and flying high. And do everything within your means to ensure that there are positive returns, because taxpayers are paying every cent of what you are earning out there. And you owe it to the country. And that is where patriotism becomes very important. You must have love of country. Country must come first. Everything else later.
We are in conversation with Dr. George Cooke. We're going for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
The People's Platform.
On our next episode, explore the VIP car wreck. Mysteries of the ocean floor. Sea of Sri Lanka. Tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. exclusively on TV1.
හෙට වෙද්දි ගෙදර ඔප්පු අපේ නමට හම්බ වෙනවා. මාව මේ ගෙදර මිනිස්සු මේ ගෙදර තියාගන්නම විතරක් නෙමෙයි. ඉන්නව මේ ගෙදරින් ඈත් කරලා තියෙන එකත් මට දැන් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම කරන්න පුළුවන්.
අද රාත්‍රී 9:30ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්
TV1 TV for life.
Police sub-inspector who shot at a driver in Naramala remanded. Sri Lanka backs Palestinian independence. West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem should be recognized. Economic reform program yielding the first signs of recovery, says IMF. Anura Kumara meets the Mahanayaka Theros.
TV1 TV for life.
The People's Platform.
Welcome back to the show. My guest tonight is diplomatic historian Dr. George Cooke. George, speak to us about the significance of the recent royal visit.
So Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, was here to mark 75 years of diplomatic relations between Sri Lanka and the United Kingdom. Now, her visit, she is seen to be one of the most hardworking members of the royal family. And she has represented the crown on numerous occasions. If you just go through the royal diary, you see her probably having the largest number of appointments over there. But what is the significance of her coming here? This is where Sri Lanka is getting highlighted in the United Kingdom. It was a big deal that she was here, and there was so much going on over here. She had such a packed visit. From the airport, she started her program. There wasn't a case of resting and starting the next day. But look at it from the other side. This is all being reported back in the United Kingdom. She's traveling the length and breadth of this country. In one day, she was in Kandy and then in Jaffna as well. She did so much to ensure balance, reaching out to all communities, reaching out to different sectors which have connectivity with the United Kingdom. Sri Lanka got a huge boost in the UK. And that is something that we must acknowledge.
Right.
So the visit is significant from this end, but what are we getting at that end? And that is the publicity, the promotion, the coverage, talking about different sectors which are being talked about over there. It might be in a newspaper, it might be a small article, it might be on the news, it might be somewhere. But something's better than nothing, and we're getting something out of it.
George, we spoke about the non-aligned movement. What is our foreign policy? Because we seem to be having knee-jerk reactions, and we have been guilty of that over the years. Speak to us about what you think our foreign policy entails. Can we even identify it?
So when we look at that knee-jerk reaction, we're seeing a lot of that lately. And this is something that must be stopped immediately. Why is that? When it comes to foreign policy formulation, implementation to be taken up later, but formulation is done by the executive. That's not just one person. The executive involves the cabinet, and there's a person with a portfolio, a minister, there's a state minister, there is a nucleus that is supposed to be involved in this. Every decision that is taken has got to be measured, the pros and cons. What are the ramifications of every word that we say? Now, there have been so many developments in the last 6 months, 7 months, where we have said things that we could have avoided saying, or we have done things that we could have avoided doing. Now, we must be mindful that we are a small cog in a big wheel. We are not a large player on the world stage. We are not someone who's giving direction to other countries. Sometimes we are taking direction from them when it comes to certain issues. But we've got to be mindful that we are not tiny, isolated, somewhere floating in the Indian Ocean. We have history, we have reputation, we have to build on that, but we have to be conscious of that. This is where we need the past, we need to understand history, we need to understand the role that other countries are playing, study them, look at them as a case study. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? How are we going to avoid those? That is where you avoid knee-jerk reactions. We should not have to get up in the morning and decide, oh, how are we going to battle the fires that are burning today? That shouldn't be the case. We should have a well-structured system by now. 75 years, this year it's 76. By now we should know exactly what should be done. What is the consultative process that should take place? Just because I have a personal opinion on an issue, I shouldn't be expressing it. And this is where we need to ensure country first. Be mindful. Today you are in power, tomorrow I am in power. Irrespective of whether it's you or myself, the country has to continue. We have to sustain that. Very often we are not doing that. We're looking at your popularity, my existence. It's becoming a bit self-oriented, which is very, very worrying.
Do we understand the concept and the conceptions of diplomacy?
We should. We should. That's a tough one there. Do we understand that? When we go back to 48, 49, we start the Foreign Service. You had giants of personalities coming in who made massive contributions over the ensuing decades. Why haven't we sustained that? Why haven't we maintained that standard throughout? Diplomacy is not something that is done where you approach someone for a vote just because you want that and you forget about them the next day. That is very opportunistic. It has to be sustained, long-term, durable relationships have to be built up with countries. And we have goodwill. But let me ask you this. Do we know that South America exists? Do we know that most parts of Africa exist? Do we know much about Central Asia other than the fact that they have long names which are hard to spell? We don't do much with these countries. Why?
Right.
We are not at a level of saturation where we have reached out to all. But what has happened? We are focusing on 2 or 3. Everything is focused in that arena. We are not looking at the bigger picture. We don't have windows into regions. We don't have key allies out there, countries with which we want to forge special relationships. We don't seem to want to do that. Why? We need that. We're not going to be able to reach out to everyone in South America. We need to have key allies there who will speak on our behalf. But we've got to go the extra mile. They're not going to come and do it for us. In Africa, this is a very significant year. We are now 70 years after the Afro-Asian conference that took place. We started with Colombo, the Colombo conference. We then went to Bandung in 55 and we had the Afro-Asian, the whole meeting that took place. Bandung was so significant. Africa and Asia came together at a very crucial time back in 55. Why aren't we reviving that? That is where we are taking diplomacy to a much higher level so that our friends out there know that we are friends. Genuine friends at all times.
Right.
Other countries, and we can take a leaf out of their book. Japan remembers what we did. China remembers what we did. Can we remember what other countries did for us last year or the year before that? Can we remember? We don't. This is where there has to be a radical change. Change in our mindset, our attitudes, our foreign policy. It has to be really reinvigorated. The way it's going right now, we need to overhaul the whole system. Review where we have been, look at where we are right now, strategize for the future. Absolutely essential.
We are also looking at the upcoming UNHRC sessions in March, George, and this is very significant in terms of from an accountability, human rights, transitional justice point of view. Also given the fact that we are currently in an IMF-supported program, also given the fact that we are looking at presidential elections, general elections. So much to consider as well. Your thoughts?
This is where when we look at Geneva, when we look at the entire UN system, very often Sri Lankans understand the UN through the prism of Geneva. We forget about the other UN agencies, organizations. We know Geneva because we talk about human rights all the time. Now, going into every session, it's not a case of going there and getting over and done with it and then say, phew, we have a break now, on to the next one. We have to be proactive. I'll give you an example. So we go back to Lakshman Kadirgama's first year.
Okay.
And he is going to Geneva. And at that point, the newly appointed government of President Kumaratunga had promised to look into upholding human rights. That was what she campaigned on when she came into power. They established the Human Rights Commission. So he went there and he said, we've done this before anyone could point fingers. We're not going there to defend ourselves all the time. We're always going there ready to, okay, what questions are going to be fielded to us? How are we going to respond to these? Where is our proactive stance? We need to go there and say, we've done this and this. We've also adopted this. And we're not doing it just because Geneva asks us to do it. We're doing it because it's good for our people, good for our country. Why are we waiting for others to tell us what we should and shouldn't do? This is where this proactive stance is absolutely essential on our part. But for that, we've got to study the system, understand the situations, bring up proposals, not just wait for, sessions are coming up, how are we going to respond, what will the statement be, how harsh will the commissioner be, what are the written submissions we have to make. Now, it's like you're preparing for an exam and you're going in to sit an exam and you're trying to answer that paper and come out.
Yeah.
We have to be proactive. That is absolutely essential. Every session at Geneva, we've got to go there and we've got to pull things out of the hat at that point and say, we've done this and this has also been taken. They are going to appreciate that at that point because they're not asking us to do something terrible or something horrible to our people. They are talking about maintaining international standards. Now, we can point fingers and say, you haven't had this at that time and we had 1931's universal franchise and we've done this. There's a power difference here. We've got to realize that we can punch above our weight, but at the same time, we are a developing country, whether we like it or not. We can't walk out of Geneva. Other countries have, which have had certain amount of backings. We have not. So we've got to be mindful of all of those areas. But one thing very important, every session at Geneva, it's not just a case of appearing before a tribunal of sorts, where you're going there to respond to allegations being made against you. You've got to go there to discuss what you have done. Talk about it, highlight it, go to town with it. But you must do it first.
Elections are coming up.
Very important year, not only for us, for many countries out there. And it's a crucial year also because we are now that much more, as Sri Lankans, that much more aware.
Right.
We are very conscious. Hopefully, all of us are. At least people have now been jolted out of the slumber that we were in. 1931 universal franchise is granted. We are now in the 93rd year. By now, we should be a very mature voting population. The polity should have matured to such an extent where we read manifestos, we debate, we analyze, we question, we go behind politicians after elections. Where is that? It's a face, it's money, it's food. We're going to some of the most basic forms in terms of deciding who to vote for.
Right.
That's not the way it should be. This is where Sri Lankans have got to realize we're at a very crucial juncture. We've seen where we have gone due to corruption. Corruption has to be rooted out. We're not going to get rid of it 100%, but let's start doing that. We've got to set a goal of getting rid of it. At least we'll get rid of some of it. So this is where Sri Lankans have got to really awaken. International community is watching. Sometimes investors might be hesitant, a bit of uncertainty. Irrespective of all of that, we've had certain very senior economists in this country saying elections are going to jeopardize programs, etc. But we need the elections. This is a democracy. We have got to manage. It was very interesting to see the IMF delegation meeting with several parties. They are reaching out to more and more now, which is the way it should be. And this is where we've got to realize we're going through taxation, we're going through inflation, we're going through the cost of living going up. How are we managing at this stage? It's really surprising that we are actually, as individuals, as citizens, keeping afloat. You talked at the very beginning, you raised the point about the mental health. We have not looked at that from a societal point of view. All the policies that are being brought in, we haven't thought of the socio-economic side of it. We're talking about how we need to increase rates. There are studies being done now where they talk about birth rates falling, migration increasing. Are we concerned about this? I was reading that 900 academics have left this country. Are we worried about that? Have we done anything to recruit and fill up those spaces? Or are we trying to suppress modules at universities? What are we doing about it? This is where going forward, this is a very crucial year. Every time we come to an election, we say it's a crucial year. But this is even more crucial than it has been in the past. If we are not conscious, we're going to come into a situation in which history is going to repeat itself. We haven't learned from our mistakes, and we don't want to go down that road again.
Before wrapping up and shifting gears, George, you have an exhibition that is on display. Speak to us about it.
The Archers of War exhibition has opened at the British Council. Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, was the first visitor to it, along with Sir Tim Lawrence. The exhibition highlights Thoraners, or Pandols, and we call them archers. We're looking for a common term there. And we're looking at the archers that were erected in Colombo 70 years ago when the Queen visited, when the Queen and Prince Philip were here in April 54. Sonali, if you look at the artwork, the labour that went into it, the impressiveness of, and that's why we're calling them Archers of Awe, because they're absolutely awesome when you understand them. And we're trying to connect up. So whilst the base is the royal visit, we're also talking about the cultural attributes of this country. We put up those archers in form of to pay some kind of honor towards the Queen, because at that time she was Queen of Ceylon, and she was visiting her country. Now, there were 21 in Colombo alone, and these have been photographed, and thankfully my maternal grandfather had photographed them, and we have those photographs. But we've also connected them with other archers that are found in India, in Sanchi, for example, in China, the Shangmen, the Paifang, what you have in Vietnam, the Torii Gate in Japan, Korea. We're trying to bring all of that together to look at the significance of cultural connectivity in our part of the world.
Okay. Where can we
So it's at the British Council in Colombo at the moment. It will be there till the 26th of January, except Sundays, Mondays and holidays. It's travelling to the British Council in Jaffna in February. It will also be at the British Council in Kandy. And then we're hoping to visit universities around the country.
All right, fabulous. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for sharing your perspectives, Dr. George Cooke. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again next Monday. Good night.